Hello and welcome to the Big Fat Apple, where our martinis are the dirtiest, but our ingredients are the cleanest. I'll be your server, Rumi. What can I get started for you? Hi, I think I'll do let me guess, a Hugo Spritz. Oh, and you're probably gonna want our Super Snatch Caesar too, with the dressing on the side. Did I get that right? Actually, no, I was gonna get your signature chicken apple club with the water. Why would you assume that oh, yeah, no, sorry. It's just like 90% of the people that come to this West Village location all order the same exact thing and wear the same thing, so I just figured you'd be like that. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. Hey guys, it's up to Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. Today, the intros are making a strong comeback, so shout out to that. But today we're gonna be talking about something that I have recently seen be a topic of conversation online, which does brought out to a larger conversation, which I think is interesting, around the concept of digital gentrification, of this whole phenomenon that we've been seeing of different cities and neighborhoods being picked up by social media, romanticized online by whatever different aesthetic appeals to that location, and having people move there en masse, essentially changing the culture that had already existed in those areas. For the sake of this video, we're mostly talking about this happening with New York, but it's happened in the past with cities like LA, Boston had a moment or is having a moment, and more. Now, this video is mostly inspired by the recent New York Mag article that came out titled "It Must Be Nice to Be a West Village Girl." And of course, with a title like that, the article did spark up a bunch of discourse and conversation. And in the discourse around the article, there were a lot of valid points made, like having the article be a fun read and sort of capturing the complaints that a lot of native New Yorkers have around the state of New York, specifically around the West Village, with a lot of transplants moving into the city and adopting a similar sort of aesthetic persona, changing the entire culture of the area. And there are also comments in the discourse talking about how there could have been more of a poignant point being made in the article, which is valid. But on the topic of gentrification, this is not a new topic. Like, even according to the native New Yorkers themselves, okay? The West Village in New York has been gentrified. Even before the white tank top, cowboy boot wearing, Pilates loving 20-somethings that are inhabiting the area right now. But what I think is really interesting about the article and the concept of what's going on right now is the intersection that we've been seeing of social media, our digital space, and how it influences our physical spaces, for the sake of this video, and for the sake of this conversation, neighborhoods. And the concept of social media influencing a whole culture shift of an entire neighborhood is actually wild, and I'm actually really excited to talk about it. Let's start by framing exactly what we're talking about here. If you didn't know, and aren't from New York, and I'm not, but I've heard of it. Over the past couple years, there's been a big culture shift in multiple areas in New York, as New York has become the destination spot for a lot of young people to move to. Like, I don't know if you remember, but there was like a huge push for like NYC content, like post-lockdown. And I don't think it's necessarily slowed up since. Like, it seemed like everyone and their mom was moving to New York from like 2021 onwards. With the influx of Day in My Life and NYC content flourishing on TikTok, YouTube, and the likes, with young 20-somethings either just graduating college, high school, or starting a new job, or just looking for a new place to move, flocking to New York City and jumping on the hype and buzz around the city. Now, this isn't to say that New York has not always been the city. Like, it is arguably the most recognizable, if not the second most recognizable city in the United States. Like, those are the two main cities when you think of like America on a macro scale. But it is to say that this shift in interest was different than previously before, because it's almost entirely driven by social media and people's assumptions around what the city is like, based on what they've seen other people enjoy. In a quote from the Cut article, "If the city washed out the last of the neighborhood's bohemians 2 decades ago and turned the West Village into a celebrity playground where real adults with real income live, the pandemic turned it into something else entirely, a bustling sorority house." Essentially getting at how most people that move to New York and choose to live in West Village all kind of look the same and act the same and are interested in the same things. My one critique of this article is that it really does harp on just the women and make it seem like it's just the girls that do this sort of thing, when in reality it's both the girlies and the guys. Like, while the West Village girl is very much into things like Pilates, Cartier bracelets, Blank Street, Hugo Spritzes, Reformation, Taylor Swift, etc., etc., I feel like the male equivalent is like the fratty finance or tech bro. Like, more than likely is interested in day trading, can't dress for his life, artsy for the aesthetic, emotionally manipulative by trade, so on and so on. But to paint more of a fuller picture, the article goes on to describe the West Village girl, saying that they move through the neighborhood in packs, wearing the local uniform, a white tank, light wash jeans and sambas, an iced matcha latte in hand, and hair slicked back into a tight ponytail. Very much the clean girl aesthetic that we've seen popular on TikTok. On this channel, we're a big proponent for letting the girlies have fun, okay? But this goes to bring up the question, like, which girlies are having fun? When you look up images of like the West Village girl, or just look at the images in the article, most if not all of the women depicted are white, thin, blonde women wearing similar outfits, all dating the same variation of the same man. And that's coming straight from the girlies from West Village themselves in the article, saying that they typically go for the fratty finance type guys, essentially showing like one brand, one type, one flavor of New York girl. And I think when you see things like this and you see the content that all of these people are trying to emulate, it's clear to see that like influencers have definitely done their job. Like, yes, the job of an influencer is to, influence people, but seeing how that whole archetype and aesthetic has like dominated a whole neighborhood to fit into this very specific aesthetic is very interesting, to say the least. And this goes into the whole conversation as to the role of social media as being a driver for gentrification, or at least cultural change in an area. Now, like I've been saying, I don't live in New York and I have never lived in New York. But from what I understand, there are more eminently gentrified areas in New York that are and have been displacing low-income people, especially low-income Black and brown people. But when it comes to the gentrification of the West Village, we can't attribute that solely, if not at all, really, to the 20-something TikTokers that we've been talking about. This has been going on for a while and truly started long before the 80s and 90s. It's time for a little history lesson, my friends. If you didn't happen to know the lore of the West Village, because I don't know why the average person who doesn't live in New York would, up until around the 1890s, the West Village used to be pretty Black up until around the 1890s, with the area actually starting the first professional Black theater in the country, called the African Grove. But that only lasted until around the turn of the century, where Black and brown people's houses were replaced with tenement buildings to make room for the newly arriving Italian immigrants. This is around the same time where the first Bohemians started really taking root in that area, with Walt Whitman being one of them. And it wasn't until after the And after that time, the neighborhood was home to Irish, Italian, and Puerto Rican immigrants, dock workers, schmex workers, artists, writers, gay, lesbian, and transgender people. And around this time, the West Village was really seen as a place for artists, writers, creatives, basically anyone looking for somewhere to live cheaply. But that quickly changed as more wealthy people started moving into the area and changing up how that area looked and went about culture. And I think that this goes to show that despite the culture changing yet again nowadays, this has been something that has been years, decades in the making. People often talk about the loss of like bohemian culture in the West Village. And a lot of that is because many times gentrification will commodify culture and make it more palatable to potential higher income residents through things like public art and art washing. And as mentioned in the New York Mag article, after the bohemian and artsy culture came the whole in the city type of crowd, making the West Village into a celebrity playground for people working in fashion, publicists, marketing, etc., etc. And none of this is to say that like places need to remain the same forever and that places like the West Village can't change. Just like how in LA, the culture in Silver Lake has been gentrified for a long time. Like, yes, it's heartbreaking for longtime residents. And yes, there are real repercussions and it sucks when it happens. And it doesn't really seem like anything is going to change. Like, the residents of those communities, specifically with the West Village, will be fine. Like for the West Village specifically, yes, these women are aiding in gentrification, but unfortunately, this is not new. The area has already been gentrified. In the West Village situation aside, I think it's less interesting that like a previously gentrified area is being re-gentrified again. I think the more pressing point or interesting point is seeing how social media is directly playing a factor into how gentrification is happening in modern day, especially with how social media is driving this homogenous or samey culture of like the white t-shirt and jeans, the Pilates, like this area collecting all these people with very similar interests that maybe did not have those interests before, but saw these interests be romanticized on social media and coming to this one place to embody that identity with others. And on a high level, you think like, oh wow, that's a pretty interesting thing sociologically, but like the outcome is just not, it's not giving, because what we're getting out of this is like a single noted characterization that's creating a almost shallow culture with little to no diversity. Like again, see the pictures in the article. Like I think this is one of the first times we're seeing through TikTok of these places becoming memeable or like influencing people to move to a neighborhood or adopt an entirely different identity based on the neighborhood that they live in and what they've seen on social media. And I guess the question to present here is like, isn't this to its own form of gentrification, or at least a takeover of the previous culture? I saw a comment on a TikTok that actually was pretty interesting here, where the poster says, yes, the West Village has long been overpriced and gentrifying, but my gripe is that these people don't seem to have respect for the neighborhood or an interest in being part of the community or caring about the artistic past of the neighborhood. Like it's truly like the whole concept of like taking an image of an image, like what are you losing? Like what aspect of culture, authenticity, whatever would have you, are you losing when you continuously gentrify or rebrand the culture? Like at what point do you completely lose sight of what was originally there entirely? And I think that this is really interesting because in like traditional forms of gentrification, or at least like population or like demographic terraforming, it usually be things like companies or like corporations buying up a bunch of land, apartments, spaces, whatever, what have you, and like funneling a bunch of their employees or a bunch of people that they feel like would fit like their aesthetic into certain areas. Like think of like the tech towns like Amazon, Meta, Apple, whatever, what have you, out in like Silicon Valley or like the West Coast, they like buy out or build these entire towns specifically for their employees and for their ecosystem. So like everyone's kind of the same. We're seeing that now, but like for free. Like instead of being paid to move and gentrify, these people are paying to go and gentrify based on what they've seen on social media. Like we don't need to sell jobs to people anymore. We just need to sell vibes and people move in mass. And as a byproduct of this, we're starting to see cultural monikers or like metropolitan city based in-jokes, both in real life with like people that live in specific locations getting specific attributes. Like one comment said like, what about Murray Hill boys? Like, what does that mean? Like they're monikers that are really only relevant to the people that live there and really build like that in-group community of people that live there. Like in LA, there's things like the Silver Lake Mustache Man or Venice Cowboy. Like, it's just really interesting to see how social media is truly influencing these neighborhoods. But I have to say, like, while this is different, this isn't necessarily the first time we've seen social media take hold of landscapes, like of actual spaces, not necessarily in a gentrifying way, but more so like social media taking up physical spaces, like maybe not to the same level of New York. But I remember back in like 2014 and 2016, LA had its moment. Like LA was like the place where a lot of people would like move for the aesthetic, for the vibe before New York really took off. But like, one example, tell me this is too niche, but like, do y'all remember like the original Hype House? Like not the Hype House like TikTokers. I'm talking about like 1600 Vine, which essentially, if you did not know, was like the original like Hype House for Viners. Like all of the biggest Viners all lived in this one apartment building off the intersection of Vine and Hollywood in LA. Like it was crazy. Like let me set the scene. It's 2014. Yes, that 2014. Vine has been out for 2 years and has created a gaggle of popular creators on the app. People like Logan and Jake Paul, Amanda Cerny, Wampa Zurita, Lele Pons, Gabby Hanna, and King Batch. And all of these creators collectively moved to an apartment complex off Vine in Hollywood. But this was just something that was truly iconic at the time, just in terms of like internet and pop culture. Because again, this is like one of the first times that you see a bunch of creators, like being a creator, or at least like a popular creator was still relatively new at that time. But like there weren't a ton of big influencers, and to have them all in one centralized area, all making content with each other, crazy. And even then, eventually more Viners and YouTubers moved into that same building, like transforming that space. It was so iconic that it even got a mention in a New York Times article back in 2017, stating that 1600 Vine offers a peek into the booming ecosystem of these social media stars. As in any cauldron of attention seekers who live and work together in the same building, it's an atmosphere rife with clichéness, jealousy, insecurity, and the social hierarchy of high school. Except everyone knows precisely how popular or unpopular you are. And it's amplified by the fact that influencers can become millionaires with a following on par with any movie stars. Oof. Harsh. They didn't like, it seems like they didn't really love influencers too much in 2017. How far we've come. And as you may or may not remember or imagine, when you put a bunch of influencers known for making crazy content, crazy stunts, loud screaming videos, the apartment management building had to put in some new regulations as they were receiving complaints from other residents. So they instated some no filming in or by the pools and no large cameras in common areas regulations, which then later evolved into no filming in common areas, period. And because of limitations like this, people began moving out or getting evicted. And a great case study for this is Logan Paul. And a quote, his escalating stunts in March alone included dangling a $20 bill from his balcony, including a fishing rod to tempt passersby, rigging a zip line over Hollywood Boulevard to send gifts to fans camped outside, and pretending to be shot as fans watched in horror outside his window. I actually did not know that most of this stuff happened. He used to do a lot. And of course, all of this led to him not getting his lease renewed. Apparently, he recorded that conversation of him not getting his lease renewed in his vlog. He moved across the street and he was asked to leave there too. So whether you're a fan of them or not, it's undeniable that most of the influencers that were a part of this culture move to 1600 Vines still have huge platforms, and their success is transferred over to other platforms. But like one question I've like always been wondering is like, did they all collectively decide to move to that one apartment? Or was it like they saw more and more people moving there, so they decided they needed to move there too? Like I want to know how that all happened, because the fact that a bunch of Viners took over an apartment building is crazy. And to clarify for this whole point, this isn't to say like the OG Viners gentrified Hollywood, but it's undeniable that it shifted something culturally and dynamic wise in the neighborhood. Like again, think back to romanticized 2014 to 2016 LA. It was romanticized to a level that it is still currently to this day thought back on as like nostalgia content. Like we miss that era, like the King Kylie era, the Flower Crown era, the Earth Cafe pink wall of it all. Like this truly is not new. The romanticization of like everyone wanting to move and live in this one area and embody this certain lifestyle has not been new in the social media sense, but it's just so interesting to see how social media influences people's living and moving habits and how it transforms areas. Now, I know we've been throwing around this word a lot, and it's a cornerstone of like this article, but gentrification. I think it's important to contextualize what we're talking about when we're talking about gentrification. So here's the definition according to the Urban Displacement Project. Gentrification is defined as a process of neighborhood change that includes economic change in a historically disinvested neighborhood by means of real estate investment and new higher income residents moving in, as well as demographic change. Not only in terms of income level, but also in terms of changes in education level or racial makeup of residents. And while this doesn't 100% apply to the West Village, because in most of our lifetimes and in recent history, it's been gentrified for a while, as we've been talking about, making it, in my opinion, less impactful gentrification than if it was disenfranchising or pushing out like current low income neighborhoods, which is happening across the country. It undoubtedly brings like a cultural shift to the city. And I think one thing that I want to talk about, and honestly is like the more harmful part for cases like West Village, where like it's not necessarily people that are already disenfranchised becoming more so disenfranchised, but more so a age demographic shift, is like oftentimes for things like this where there is like a rise in gentrification or there is a population shift or like a city becomes super hot and trendy, is that people from outside the city or outside the neighborhood will flock to the city or neighborhood, want to change everything about the city or neighborhood to like fit their needs, their interests, disregarding or closing down any previous businesses, shops, attractions, or whatever that existed before the boom. And then eventually and inevitably, in a couple of years, when the trend or the excitement or the hype around the city dies off and most people move out of that city, they leave the city or neighborhood a shell of itself, completely devoid of the culture that it had before. And I think that that is a huge issue. Like you can see it very visibly in cities like San Francisco. There's a movie called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. And there's a scene that really shows the difference between like a gentrifier mentality and a local mentality. And the scene essentially depicts like an older wave of gentrifiers, that being the hipsters of San Francisco, being upset with the new wave of gentrifiers in San Francisco, being like the tech bros and startup people, and the hipsters essentially abandoning the city. No loyalty to it or adding value to the culture. And I think that that really is the cornerstone to a lot of frustrations that locals have, or at least the transplants that have actually done the part to integrate into a city. Because for a lot of transplants or gentrifiers, whatever you want to call them, they view a new trending city as like this playground in place for their own personal character development for this era in their life, and then take off and leave somewhere else, somewhere safer, to like settle down once the city no longer suits them. Which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, but when it's happening in mass and you're seeing like this exodus of people after again quickly and drastically reshaping the culture, demographics, and economy of a certain location, just up and leaving does have impacts for people that do choose to stay there or have no option to leave, who are there in the first place. Like I imagine it's so frustrating to have a whole culture of an area stripped and extracted and then replaced just for those same people to go and abandon it. And I guess my last point for all this is to say like, yeah, no, moving to a new place doesn't make you inherently a bad person. Like you're not a bad person or a crazy gentrifier to move to New York, to move to LA, to move to whatever city you want and to live your life. And I do think there are more ethical ways to go about moving or gentrifying or taking up space as a new person in a new community for you. Things like integrating yourself more into the already existing culture and community of the neighborhood or city that you're living in. Getting involved. Give back to the communities that you're living in. And stop saying things like you've discovered a new hidden gem that you're obsessed with and it's so cheap and local. And then go on to list a place that has existed in that neighborhood for years and is a staple of the neighborhood and everyone knows about. Like research the neighborhoods you plan on moving in, get to know them, and more importantly, join existing places and programs and help support and build them. Because we say this in all the more socio-cultural sign of the times videos that we do on the channel, but like getting involved in community really does help a lot of the things that we have going on right now. But yeah, y'all, that's gonna be it for this video. I guess a question to leave y'all off on is if this is a thing, if the whole TikTokification of physical places is a thing and continues to go on, taking over places like the West Village, San Francisco, whatever, what have you, what place do you think is next? And what shape do you think it's going to take? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're new to the channel, then definitely don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and follow me on my social medias at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Other than that, y'all, I've been Imurgency, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.